Did we talk about dates yesterday?
We did, we said we talked about.
Actually, I was just planning on sitting here in the room.
Because I had asked.
It's gotta be smart, I can never do it right. You don't have a sense of humor when you keep sharing it.
Before we get started, if you guys want to go to the Missouri Conference for History Education, it's in Kansas City this weekend, Thursday, Friday.
I'm good.
All right, we're starting. Craig, you want to go on and verify? Let me tell you first of all, if I may, what I found out yesterday. You remember we had the legislators come in and talk to us and say that we weren't supposed to listen to DASI or the state board or anything. We were we were the only room they did that with. And all the other rooms, it was just thank you, congratulations, that type of thing. Because I was concerned about it, as I told you, I don't know if I was, after getting there. So as facilitators, we were told this to continue at your pleasure. If you want us, we'll stay. These guys will too. The only concern we will have, the three of us, as some of you will, is if we change these first 6 dates, we may not be available at those times. Now, again, I serve at your pleasure, so you can say, get lost, I think we've got it, and that's fine with me. But you may want to, I think, at least keep the recorder and the person that's doing the videotaping and that kind of thing. And again, it would just depend on if the dates have changed.
Speaking for myself, you've done an excellent job in letting us work and keeping us on track. And I mean, why take out the support system that's beneficial?
So then let's make a motion to keep the facilitator, the recorder, and the note taker, and the current dates.
I second that.
You good? Julie, okay? All right, thank you. I'm ready now, thanks.
There we go.
Now, having said that, there's a couple of those dates I have to leave early because of those obligations that
But I think
I'm fine with.
We'll all leave whatever you do.
Oh, the other thing we need to do is we need to go on and choose a co-liaison in the event that you're not here. So, anybody who would just be happy to be doing that?
I heard you really good.
And I will let you say it.
The other vote is passed.
Oh, yeah, I like that. I'm more than willing.
There was a sudden scare.
Okay, motion to make Patrick the co-liaison,
Second.
all in favor? Okay.
All right, and we are back to,
Before we get back to that, I'd like to, over lunch I took the opportunity to meet with some of the people who were in the secondary social studies group, just to ask them where they were and how they were working on things, to get a sense, because ultimately our 2 committees will have to work together to ensure that we have a scope and sequence that's best for children in terms of social studies. And they were going to check and see if the rest of their group, maybe we could spend 10, 15, 20 minutes to where the 2 groups could debrief out what they've been working on for the last 2 days. So I haven't heard back from that. But one thing they did want me to share with everyone is sort of where they are, what they've been working on a little bit, which they sent to me in a chart that looks like this graphic. And so what they're looking at this point are those strands and how they break out across the different grade levels. So it says 6, 7, 8, world history, American history, government, and how those strands kind of play out across there in an integrated thematic way. So that's part of what they're working on. But if they contact me and say that, they were also planning on leaving early, so I don't know if they'll have time to meet with us. But if they contact me, then I'll ask you if you guys want to meet, just so that we can share with them what we've been working on, the approach we're taking, just as an informational point.
okay, I just got over lunch, a note from Melinda saying that we can recommend changes to the Show Me standards for Mark Van, he's the attorney that works for the state board. So we can recommend changes to the standards if we want to.
Can it go, but it has to stay no more than 75?
It has to stay, where it's,
Understand.
my understanding is there are only 73.
73 right now, yeah.
Two up the ground, so. We can recommend the one that we wanted to and see if it makes it through them. Well, the state board is really going to make the decision maker on what we do, but I think we certainly can recommend, since we know there are two low standards that are open spots that are open, and we can recommend that we have one. Maybe not the following two. It's up to you all.
Am I correct, though, that those two open spots are also open to
everybody.
That's why I said we have to recommend, and then they would have to decide which one they thought was the most important. That would be the point.
First one.
Well, I think we all know that teachers and schools are facing a crowded curriculum.
All that,
And so any addition that we want to make, we have to be really careful about doing that and weigh all that in consideration.
Okay, what I had was you wanted to see if the standards, in interdisciplinary structure, and he had stated that, he might state it again, and then we were just ready to go and get comments.
Yeah, so basically the thought was, as I looked again at on the blue sheet where it says social studies, the organization of the social studies standards are really, to me, as I read these, disciplinary based. There's a standard on world history, there's a strand on economics, et cetera, et cetera. From what we've discussed the last couple of days, the world we live in and the world that our children will be growing up in and becoming hopefully successful leaders in our country and in the world is one that's really much more complex than that. And understanding the social studies requires some interdisciplinary understanding. And that in some ways, if we could do it, I think our standards would be better if we taught in a more interdisciplinary fashion within the social studies, because to understand human beings is to understand the complexity of interactions of human beings with their environment with each other. And so as I look at that, that would be a goal that I would have, would be to somehow support more interdisciplinary learning within the social studies.
Do you mean inter or intra?
I guess we're saying intra, but because I'm talking within the social studies itself. So intra-disciplinary, so geography and history and wherever we can support that, I think it makes a richer experience and a more holistic understanding or opportunity for understanding for our children.
Any further comments? Karen?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't have any questions.
I think it's going to come back to, so I keep going back to in our head the very first part of the conversation. You actually kind of went both sides.
Yep.
So I think it's kind of depending on whether we want to, is it woven in throughout,
Right.
or is it some strand? I think that's going to be a consistent conversation we're having, or is it both? And then just being aware of how we're doing it. And that would be my concern, because I thought we've kind of gone on both sides of the fence on this issue of, do we want it its own to make it stand out, or do we want it woven in? Do we want both? Can it be both? So I think it's something we have to continue by. The idea that you would, I keep going back, and we talked about it in lunch, you would like the second grade model that which seems to do that very well.
And you have to change the standards so you can do it.
Right, you may not.
You may not, it's just a pedagogical approach, right?
So is there a set of recommendations that we write with the standards that would be for practice? So is there a set of recommendations on how we integrate?
Possibly that could be in the inquiry standard. If we looked at the inquiry standard, in terms of adapting that standard to stress interdisciplinary focus, maybe it would work that way. So we keep our disciplinary strands, but within the inquiry tools, one of the things that we emphasize is this interdisciplinary perspective.
My,
That way we're not creating a new beast in a sense.
my concern is that the more intradisciplinary we make it, the less, I'm afraid it'll get washed in.
Yeah,
That's just my concern.
I understand. And I know the National Council for Social Studies tries to make theirs much more interdisciplinary.
Absolutely.
And I think people, because of that, struggle with implementing them in the classroom more.
Well, they look at, I've shown some teachers C3 in the document, but I've shown some teachers C3, and it seems so unlike what we're doing.
Yeah.
That they struggle with
They do.
getting their arms around it.
But perhaps if we, sort of what I heard you saying is include within the inquiry, within that process standard, that when teachers teach these subjects and when students think about these subjects and apply it, they're doing it in an interdisciplinary manner. That would be a way to maybe still achieve both worlds.
And I think the question that comes to my mind, and not that I don't agree with your point, but thinking about these being K-12 standards, I think it would be difficult to sell high school on that interdisciplinary approach because they are so course oriented. And,
Shame.
well,
Can I, just on reflecting on that, I'm actually doing a workshop for a school district in our area where I'm bringing an economist, a geographer, and a historian together to look at the Cold War period through those individual disciplinary lenses to help teachers who teach in world history, American government, and U.S. history who are teaching, they're teaching a unit on the Cold War. Well, how can you bring in those disciplinary lenses in one thematic unit? So I think it can be done, and they're very excited and open to it. But I don't think we have done it. And so
I
it would be a
agree.
change for many people.
we did something similar back at my local high school, through theater and geography and history and writing and reading and having to do with the bombing of the plane in Lockerbie. And it was phenomenal. Then there was such a broad buy-in from so many different kids that otherwise would have been isolated in one classroom had they not tried to approach it from an interdisciplinary approach. But I think those kinds of things are catching on, but they're not the norm.
Right.
Yeah, that's another question.
One of the biggest things, again, and like I said, in that respect, I'm old school. We have a lot of this stuff here, so again, how can we emphasize that a lot of it is supposed to be already in, but we're not using it. So how can we, I mean, we've talked at length about how school districts, especially on our level, K-5, have dropped this stuff right here in favor of the reading and the math, because that's on the test. So how do we fight that battle? I mean, we can do the standards and all that, and we have this. I know your question was, or your idea was, to get the citizenship, do we make another standard or not? The more I look at it, the more complicated it becomes, but at the same time, it's already there. So how do we put an umph behind it where schools will say, yes, we will do this, and we have to do this? Again, that's the frustrating part for me, has been for years. So, you know, the standards, we've looked at them, we've taken some things, and I think we can do a very good job on it. But I think we already have a lot of this stuff here. So how do we incorporate that and make it work? Because even if we add the citizenship standard in social studies, if we don't do this part right here, and it says right here, and it says it right here, students will demonstrate within and integrate across all content areas. we've got the machine already here. So how much of fine tuning do we do with it?
I should make it right.
I should have written it down. I was talking in my head as a baby, with my story. I'm sticking to it if I remember. You were talking about, remind me what your point was.
How we can bring the different disciplinary lenses to an individual subject matter to try to have interdisciplinary or interdisciplinary.
Why are you thinking I have to? There's actually one and do we want to look at a lot of what I'm hearing you talk about actually, you said pedagogy or instruction. So is there a part, do we do something that maybe some of that, do we actually do, similar to the way that it did kind of come out with or that it was the idea of those instructional shifts of the math, the best practices for the math. Do we create some sort of an idea around what are those best instructional practices around delivering social studies? And it may be, it could be looking at integrating intra and inter and how we can take some of those pieces because of some of this into how to do some treatments, like some of those crosswalks. But do we want to, should we almost look at answering some of these questions in a separate framework with some of the instructional shifts that need to happen to be able to meet the needs within the standards so we can start to do that? And that's just one of the questions just in general, just an idea. And the other thing I was thinking of, I know they're K through 12, but is there not some benefit as we're talking about building a foundation? Do we want to look at K through 12 English standards of those, and then something different that K through 5 may have a little bit different, and then the 6 through 12, where it's almost not necessarily for two separate work groups? So is it going to be one complete document, or are there going to be certain things that may be in the K through 5 document that may not be in the 6 through 12 document?
I think what's going to be, okay, it's me again. Prevalent in K-5 has to be the knowledge base. You have to have that in there. And also attached to that, the why part. So when they move up into 6 and 7 and 8, they have those concepts down where a teacher doesn't have to spend all his or her time or introducing it for that fact or teaching it all together, but it can be dovetailed into what they have, what information they provide.
With math, where you have a basic math, there's a foundational math component, and then as they get older, it becomes more specific. Geometry, algebra, they get more specific skills, or even science, where you have 4th and 5th grade science, but then when you get into high school, it's AP biology, chemistry, physics, that are all woven into a more general K through 5 piece. And it's already kind of set up that way. There's world history, U.S. history, geography. As they get older, it's more broken up.
But the same skills, the same basic skills still apply to all of them.
Right, that's why I'm wondering if it does need to be some, because there's a difference in just the way things are approached in the K through 5 versus the 6 through 12.
That was my question, as far as we have some kind of instruction, which could be what you're talking about, or like the 8-minute practices, that kind of thing, instructional shifts. I think that's helpful. Maybe that would be as helpful as writing standards, would be to get some suggestions, because the law clearly states these are just suggestions when it comes to pedagogy. But it would be nice to have those suggestions, because there would be a lot of teachers who appreciate that guidance.
Unless they were included in the inquiry standard.
Right,
Yeah.
that'd be the only other piece, is if somehow you include them in that. To go back to what Ralph was saying, I frustrate teachers often by taking, and my wife, and when we're looking at social studies standards, mostly I take them to where the bottom says 1.4 or 2. So I have them think about what's pedagogy look like if we're still using this chart, because we still use this. It's still a chart in our, so I have them come back to this. So I get what you're saying. but we still guide our pedagogy. And so what does that mean if it says 1.10? What's that mean for the kind of question you ask if you're thinking about assessment? Those are the kinds of things we're still looking at as a district. So it hasn't lost on us, but it's definitely not it's not a driving force across the state.
Okay, I'm hearing lots of things. There we started off with, looking at making the standards or recommending that the standards be taught in intradisciplinary fashion. Then we come around to, I think I heard multiple lenses at some point in time, and that each standard was viewed through multiple lenses of within social studies. Relevance, again, came into play, as well as the strong foundational piece that included some knowledge base for the kids to hang their hats on. And then we've also talked about making a separate list of shifts or recommendations for practice that would be included as part of the document. So that's several different things. I'm not sure we have anything to even full consensus on out of that unless somebody wants to propose something. Or maybe we should just go around again and with those things in mind, check and see where we're going. So Alden, if I come back to you.
If I come back to me, I think I would go back to the same, I think, starting statement that, it would be my opinion that we should look for ways to support the interdisciplinary teaching of social studies. To use the standards, to have the standards support more interdisciplinary teaching and learning of social studies.
Okay, so you would prefer going that route as opposed to having standards of practice as an amendment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, and I think that practices are very important too. And I would like to see us include some recommendations for both in some format, not necessarily a separate format, but that we would recommend both.
Some standards of practice as well as some interdisciplinary.
Whether that's a
Whether we write
separate
it
thing that we
in.
do, or whether we embed it in whatever we do.
Laura?
I agree with that. The way our curriculum is written, we have like goals and standards on one side, and then we have recommended materials, practices, however you want to list it. Not very high school driven at all, but just ideas, things where someone who is new to seeing this, even a parent can pick it up and go, okay, so my kindergartner is identifying visual, graphic, and auditory aids. What does that mean? Oh, look, they can use it by teaching these things. So I think it gives someone without an educator's viewpoint an easier time of understanding exactly how it's working out and how their kids might be taught.
I agree with that. Also, it just keeps coming to mind. Everybody has certain teachers that you're gonna have backlash about any of this anyway in your school district, giving them some ideas of how to introduce this or how to actually teach this is gonna help them tremendously. So, because they're gonna have a problem with whatever it is we have here, they're gonna argue and complain and whatever it is. But if you give them some idea, it helps kind of ease their mind, I guess, about how they're gonna do it. I mean, I wish we could get rid of all teachers that are like that, but it doesn't happen. But, I mean, if they can't do what they're supposed to do, then they should do something else.
I would agree, that is a bad type of thing, and agree with everything you said before, so.
Okay, so you're agreeing, and my understanding is we're agreeing that we would like for them to be interdisciplinary, and we would also like to have some standard of practice.
I mean, personally, I think that the standards of practice are really gonna help make it interdisciplinary. I'm not sure what you said.
So maybe interdisciplinary.
Yeah, I think that they're already not necessarily intradisciplinary,
say, what Alden says with the tag of either through the standard or through instructional practice. I forget what it's called.
Then say something that's gonna sound like a devil's advocate, and I don't mean it to be that way, but I'm just thinking in terms of perception. The more some of the pushback of previously written standards by large organizations lends to taking away the local flavor.
Sure.
And the more prescriptive we become in identifying practices in these standards that we're writing, are we just falling back into that same situation of where we're now telling the standards are, as I've always been led to believe, the Missouri Learning Standards, state standards, whatever, Common Core standards, whatever you want to call the name, pick a name for it, is a baseline, and that there's the intention that local districts develop their own individual curriculum, their own individual things that they, Willard history, Ozark history, whatever the case might be. Whether that's really happening or not, or whether people are just adopting the document and running with it, who knows? But having said that, if we're truly trying to create a document that allows for local participation in the implementation of these standards, I just am wondering, I agree that teachers aren't gonna be able to take this roadmap and get from point A to point B without a lot of support and without a lot of suggestions and a lot of recommendations. I just caution how deep into that this group goes.
I think you bring up an interesting thought for me in that, is it really instructional practices that we're talking about, or is it student practices that we're talking about? That there are certain practices that we want students to engage in, like we want them to engage in certain mathematical practices or literacy practices. Within social studies, there are practices we want students to be, I want students to be analyzing documents and other sources. That's very important to me. I think it ups the level of engagement. I think it connects it to real world applications. We can looking at an actual document here, not just what somebody else said about the document, but here it is. And so I think, I do think that's a good point, but I do think it's important that we articulate important student practices.
And I agree with that as well. I think framing it in terms of outcomes, like I think that's been brought up before. What do we expect students to be able to do if these objectives or standards have been met? Framing it from the student outcome versus teacher outcome.
Teacher has to do this, it's rather than the student shall.
And the standards are currently written that way. And in particular, the social studies inquiry one would be one that if we thought, as part of beefing it up, which I think was one of our earlier issues, modernizing in terms of technology, it also might be in terms of how we integrate the social studies disciplines. That as a student is learning these concepts of social studies, that part of that is understanding that it's not history alone. It's history as well as maybe some economics and geography combined together, really helping understand the American Revolution.
And I agree with the local control, I can see that, but just from looking at this, like grade 3, tools of social science inquiry, dictionaries, I don't think most of them ever use words, encyclopedia, does your kid know what one is? Atlas's Almanac's telephone directory. You know, when I look at stuff like that, those are suggestions on how to use those, but we're not using them, they're not working for us, so something has to change. So I think at best, a suggestion, not a, you know, you have to, and all these things will help our kids.
And I guess I'm just advocating that we be careful about the
No,
terminology
absolutely.
we're gonna put to
Right.
that.
That's what I was thinking, the wording, how it's worded, like you said, examples would be a good way to put that rather than practices.
What is it? Such as.
Yes, and.
Yes, and.
Anybody else before we try to come to some decision?
One of the things, how many of you were around when this first came out? What did you think? I remember getting this, our principal handed this to us and said, guess what we're gonna be doing? We all looked at him and we go, what? He goes, we're rewriting your curriculum. That's what we did. And later on, I got to thinking about it, why didn't we rewrite your curriculum? It's already in there. But then it was also, the big question always was, how are we gonna teach this, how are we gonna do that? That's why I like that idea of giving examples of use this, this, and this. And I understand the local control thing, because what you have available for resources in your district, what I have available in my district, that's gonna be hugely different. You know, you're a bigger district, you're a small rural district. We just finally got our internet website to the point where we have Wi-Fi, where it doesn't conk out in parts of the building, you know. But the thing again is, looking at all of this and making suggestions, and again, we're making recommendations, but we also have to be strong in the fact that what we present has to stand up, so teachers can use it. And then as they teach that to the students, the part I like was students' responsibility. And a lot of times we all look at this, oh, the teacher has this, it's the teacher's job here. This stuff here is for the students. So somehow we gotta get that across. And then it also has to be brought across to parents, and nothing worse than a school district handing a parent a curriculum guide and go, what's this mean? If you have the examples in there, teachers love examples. I'm gonna be honest. If I had something set on the side already, I can try this. Well, that won't work in my classroom, but I have an idea that I can come from that. So I don't think we're gonna restrict ourselves or dictate to a district what to use, but at least it starts in conversation or turns on the light bulb where a teacher looks at it and goes, I can do that. You know, and I think it would also take the sting away from being told, here are the new standards. They're not new standards, they're revised standards, they're more user-friendly, and it incorporates a lot more learning without saying it incorporates a lot of learning. I mean, what we've done today already, just by recognizing citizenship and the human factor is not in these standards. That's huge. So.
Would you like to phrase something for us? Then we can get a sense of the group. What you said. Okay.
We would, I forget what even the languages we're using for these phrases, the social studies standards. So yeah, again, I'm just gonna try to phrase something and you guys should support more interdisciplinary learning by students.
And you're not gonna put how that's done.
Nope, I think that would be for further elaboration as we start working. And we have a fuller committee and people can really weigh into that more.
Social studies standards should support more interdisciplinary
Learning.
Okay, let's have a thumbs up if we support that statement, and then we'll have to figure out how that might work. All right, thumbs down, you're opposed, abstained.
May I interrupt for a second? So the high school or secondary group said they would like to meet with our group to debrief at 2:00 if we want to. And the idea is that they would share what they've worked on over the last 2 days. We would share what we worked on, just so that the two committees would have a sense of where each other are. They'd like to do that at 2:00, but they're turning at 2:30. Of course, we don't have to do that. We can say, just send us a written summary if we want. So I'm just putting that out there as part of communication.
Everyone's pleasure.
Anybody interested in this?
Either way sounds good. I don't know what you guys do first. Not only
See
is
where
that,
we're at.
I just, I think we could get this done somehow.
I think
I
it's-
think we're doing pretty good.
I think I would like to, just especially before we meet again, just to kind of at least have a framework and understanding of what the pieces of puzzle are.
So we thumbs up? You want thumbs down? Okay, all emails, we'll come to their room too.
I think are they downstairs?
At 8:50.
Very efficient upstairs.
8:50.
Just now once.
They can come to us, because we're on their way out.
Oh,
Alright, yeah,
yeah.
let's make it a power struggle.
Let's put it on.
How about you come to us?
I will do yours.
We got walk last, everybody else. There we go. I think that's why I walk here, because 1 floor down, there's the cafeteria, and if you look up, it looks like there's cars. This is one.
Could you clarify, was it intra or inter?
So within the social studies.
Good thing.
Lucky I don't want to see that.
Okay.
Yeah, this would be good too, but let's,
It was just a joke. We're
so,
fine.
Do you have more?
No, we're fine.
It's Aaron's decision. Aaron's second.
I actually, what she just said, I don't think we should forget about the interdisciplinary. I'm just kind of going off the
I think that's.
top of my head. I know it's there, and there's back pieces.
On the back.
But I think we have to just want to continually be cognizant of the fact that social studies does kind of get pushed to the side, especially in elementary. High schools, it's different because you have to get a certain number of credits.
That is it now.
What number it actually is. What we do have is you have recommended minutes of how many recommended minutes of social studies a student is supposed to get per week, but it's not necessarily the required number of minutes. So I think that is, if we can be cognizant about the fact that if we can give tips and tools on how to best incorporate some of this stuff into reading, or what are some of those connections with reading. I'm sure right now in some reading group somewhere they're talking about nonfiction text. They're talking about what are text features in nonfiction, and how do you use maps to understand this nonfiction story about something. And it's going to be in there. So I just think if we can start to make sure that we're not losing that, I honestly, again, I don't know the language, I don't know what that needs to look like, or I just want to make sure that it's one of those things that, whether or not it's a post-it note or anything else that we need, I think it's something we have to be cognizant of, because I can also say from a building standpoint, if I'm looking at it from just the building standpoint, there's only so much time. And at times you do have to kind of make exceptions, that means something's going to be left out. So it is hard to say we're going to cut minutes for kids that are struggling readers to make sure that they do get some of it. I mean, and it's not that you're looking to cut something, and that is the discussion that's happening probably in every school every day about, look, we're out of time, we've only got 7 hours. So how are we going to make sure we get every kid what they want, and this kid's 2 grade levels below in that and reading, are they going to be able to access all this information right now anyway, or do we need to first get their reading skills up and then try to get them to access the information? So I think it's something to be aware of.
Clarifying question.
Yes.
A question we need to ask someone regarding this process. If the front side of this document is up for grabs, except for health and fine arts, but nobody's working on that.
That's right.
So I'm
Actually,
assuming,
that's the backside of the document.
okay, I'm assuming these 12 aren't up for grabs, but these other 4 boxes are. Does that mean the backs, the front side, the gold, are they also up for grabs?
And that was my initial question when I texted Melita. And her response to me was not in terms of goals, but in terms of the standards, because that was.
Right. So if
I can ask her again.
this disappears, then what Patrick's talking about is highly important.
Exactly.
If this doesn't disappear and it stays here, then what Patrick's talking about is highly important. We just have to figure out how this fits.
So I think that's a question we need to answer before we move in.
Okay.
I mean, that's of importance, don't you think?
Right, knowing the goals, I think.
Or is there, I just want to, are the goals gonna stay the same? Or are they gonna be different? Are we supposed to be, is there some,
My assumption, but I'm gonna check it because sometimes my assumption.
right, and that's what, I think we do that.
Is that based on her response, that we can work with the standards, but not the goals? Because my question was, can we work with the goals? And she initially said, this document is not up for grabs, that we're only supposed to be working with the GLEs. Okay, but when she got back to me, she said, we can work on the standards, but she didn't mention those. I will ask those.
Well, I mean, cause if I just take it, looking at those 4 goals, they cover all of the areas that are now working right now, so it's not just this one thing.
Right.
So I'm not sure we would even be able to, I think we'd wanna make sure, that seems like to me that should be, if we're gonna talk about integrating, not that we probably need to integrate the practical teach. And figure out some way to have a discussion on those types of things cross curriculum.
These pieces are included in the, I'm saying, these are included in 73.
Right.
That's part of the tally of 73. So we need,
So there's 69 on the backside and then the 4?
no, I'm saying,
33,
Okay, so each
33 on this side,
individual number,
and
okay,
then-
that's 33.
33 on the front side, and 40 on the back side,
Okay.
which gives you 73.
Okay.
Oh, that's
Initially, again,
Right.
I
That's why I said that. If all 75 to extra are up for grabs, that means this side's up for grabs.
Technically, it should be, if that's what you're.
So
Yeah, I thought that was
Whoever-
an animal. That's okay with 73.
whoever created this needs to. That hurts.
I just texted.
Okay.
Now, what I will tell you, just as a point of history, it was absolutely, it took us at least 2 months to argue back and forth between having goals that were not content specific,
Right.
that would apply across all contents, instead of having everything just as a curriculum silo. So this was a hard fought thing to do. Not that a lot of people pay attention to the goals, but
Right.
we felt like they needed to be there to promote and interdisciplinary
Sure, I agree.
processes being used across all subject areas. That's just point of fact. And one of the writers. It's not that I don't think it needs to be changed. This was many years ago, so it certainly needs to be updated. But,
I feel like we're in a social space.
right,
I feel like we're just a social space.
that's right. That's right. Okay, so here's, oh wait, no, we're on to another thing. So you're talking interdisciplinary.
Yes, ma'am.
You comment, Julie? You're good? You're good? Good. Kathy? Or Aaron, comment? Patrick was talking about
Kind
interdisciplinary.
of what he was talking about, if we are gonna talk about the goals, yes, we definitely need to be in a very large room with all these groups, and that could be a real big process to have to change those if that's,
Well, the
Yeah,
question is, should the liaisons come
oh, maybe that would be a,
the night before
yeah.
we have this next set of 2 meetings to understand what,
to work through that process.
Right. with that, so
I second your awesome.
Tag me. So I was gonna say, I had the same thought, I just didn't throw it out there.
You're just close, you're right.
Oh, I think they're gonna make us all kinds of look. Interesting, when I saw the liaison relation, I think it sounds like it's both and all of the stuff, just in case, so everybody knows what happened both. So, I actually, I didn't realize that these were considered part of the 73, so I was actually probably gonna even take a whole other step back, and that seems to me like that's something we really, really need to know. Because if it's,
Those are up for grabs.
because if we start losing those, or for some reason those 4 goals go away, I think it's gonna be really important in the language that we use and how we start to frame these things on what we're gonna do. If we can't, if they go away, then, and they're not going to be replaced with similar types of things, I think we're gonna have to look at how we write it, what we put in there, to understand those pieces aren't there. If they are there, then we're gonna be looking at it, I would look at what we're writing an entirely different way. And a lot of it's just gonna be drawing attention back to these 4 goals.
right, as we write our piece, we tie in.
You can actually reference,
Right.
goal 1.1, you could reference things to. But if they're not there, or even if the language is gonna change, or if there's nobody that's looking at those, do they need to be looked at, they need to be updated? And that's probably a discussion, because right now, they're not tied to any of the stuff anybody seems to be necessarily working on, but my guess is that this is being talked about.
Well, when we talk about interdisciplinary and all those types of things, you'll find those throughout the goals section. That's the part where we want all of those things used.
I think the revision of the statute though repealed the approval of this. I think is what it's, so if we
So
do
it
not,
may be-
yeah. I agree that means that's a much broader discussion.
So I will find that out. I just texted her that kind of messenger that, so hopefully before today, otherwise I'll email you all and let you know what I can.
That creates such a, I don't even know the word you use, but kind of a potential effort and futility if we develop what our thoughts are around a document that other groups are saying we want to do away with completely.
So that's an important question.
So these just got bigger,
Or they may have, or may not,
or at least a little more blurry, but a little more work.
because these are goals, not standards.
Right.
But they tie in.
And if it says 75,
Right.
and
And
that's
there are
included.
goals written under, standards written under goals,
I mean,
as well
that's-
as those that are written by somebody. So we'll have to see if those are applicable or not. Okay,
And if they are, how are they gonna be looked at? Like, is there a process, I can see there's obviously a plan, someone put a plan in place for how we're gonna look at these 4 content areas. And it may not even be if I haven't studied the bill, but it looks like it's not even written in there. So my concern is that what's going to end up happening, if we just follow what's in there currently, those are gonna be gone, and that's important enough. Because if there's committees that are writing them just for science, social studies, math, and language arts, there's not a committee to even look at these. So do we actually have 43, or do we actually have whatever it is, the number? Yeah. Yeah.
73 total.
We're saying you're total, that includes like.
Right, what I'm
Yeah.
saying, do we have
Right.
the 43 or just the 2 to work with? So
right, that's the question. Definitely so. Okay, our last thing is social studies should support more interdisciplinary learning. Do we want to add interdisciplinary learning to that? All of that. Any thoughts? Leave it as is, add interdisciplinary.
Can you make that green sticky?
I can make it green sticky. Come back to
Ask
the
the question. Right, because we need to revisit that based on the answer.
That's a very good point.
Green sticky.
green sticky dip. Yes.
What would we do without the stickies?
And
Yeah,
that's
I'd
what-
write different colors than they want.
Blue.
I can already write on this side.
I use those on my kids if I wanted to see them. If their work was okay, I put a smiley face on it, put it on the desk so they didn't have to see me. If I put a pink one or a red one with a frowny face on it.
Johnny, can I ask you where you saw the 75? Is it in the bill or is that on something else?
It's-
Oh, that's on the bill.
I actually think it's in the
Yeah, it's
bill,
in the
because I
bill.
read it last
It's
night.
just no more than,
Do you know what page?
More than, yeah.
it's very front page.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is, right there, it's only the
75 academic performance standards. Yeah.
And that's what we were charged with
Okay.
before.
What is a little murky, I think, is that then it goes into the specifics of subject area work, which would speak to the content standards, but not necessarily to the process standards, and so that's where I need the clarification. That
There
it's
was enough research.
Well, what it says though is academic performance standards.
I can tell you that what we were initially told is that we were supposed to look at just the leads. But now we're learning, because we asked the question, that we can also look at these, so that, you know, we just need to dig further, and I think every time it's gonna have to go to the attorney.
You can't do this without this.
Right, yeah, that's, and it says 75 standards, and that's, I can't
Yeah,
count
it
it.
sounds like grade 6 to 12 have already monitored to the glees.
They have, I think so, I'm waiting to hear if they're gonna meet with us or not.
So if they've already, and I know science has also already started working with the glees and fleas. So,
Do you have any idea how many items are within
This one.
this document? Can I ask the question? Because when you read in the language of the rules and stuff, and the different statutes, it's, you know, the word shall and the word may, if you can different times. Shall to me is obligatory, right? It's required to do. May is, you can look at it and you can do what you want, but these are suggestions or ideas. Am I understanding, like, the standards are, this is what every school district in Missouri is obliged to do, or required by law to do? And then are the grade level expectations, the may part?
Yes.
So it's, a school district can choose to do these things, but ultimately, all they're required to do is this. Correct?
This.
Yeah, what it does is
No, my point is, they don't have to follow this. If they're doing their own, I mean, to me, that's what I'm trying to understand, this is the shall, they have to teach these things. The may of how they do it, this is a suggestion, but this is not state required, is that what I'm trying to understand?
That's correct, except they're tested at those grade
They're
levels.
tested.
what is in there is you're responsible for it. So if it's a 4th grade test, everything goes say 4th grade ELA.
So again, it all comes back to the test.
Yeah. If you go backwards. So anything on the 4th grade line or below, you can be responsible for it at the 4th grade level. So you could teach it at the 2nd grade level, but it will be assessed by the time you get 4th grade.
And every district puts their own spin on it, so they'll take those glees and these standards and clump them into curriculum the way they think fits. So what Rockwood does can look very different from what Ozark does, but the idea is that in both cases, they're covering the same material, but in the way that their district has decided to package it for the teachers, or not. Because some districts don't at all.
I think it's clearest to see when you look at 6, 7, 8 science. So you have 5th grade test in science and you have an 8th grade test in science. How you teach 6, 7, and 8 grades is absolutely up to you, as long as they've had it before the 8th grade.
Yeah.
So we flip them around, which may not be the wisest when a kid moves to your district and mine.
That's right.
But it worked well for us.
Yeah.
So our pattern does not follow the leads at all. It follows what we want to do, what makes sense educationally to us.
You're following the leads, just not at the grade level.
Right.
and not necessarily in the same way. So you're trying to achieve the same outcomes of the beliefs.
By expert, yes.
You wanna be there when the assessment hits and have it all covered. But how you drive to it,
Can be very,
take the
very
scenic tour, take
Yeah,
the
same
circle.
ones, different, different routes.
You know, so
Different roads get to the same.
those are all determined at the district level.
same thing like I said when I first started teaching my pencil line to do the fifth grade objectives. Your textbooks, teach it. Just make sure by the end of fifth grade, we got it all covered.
Those coverage on what we get. Right, sorry.
Assessors and lines.
Do you have anything else on your list that you would like to reconsider?
No, I think that one is, the three readings that are written down, we've already covered.
Julie, anything on your list you'd like to reconsider? No. Anything on your list of looking at the leads you'd like to reconsider?
That sheet.
The replacements.
Yeah, not at this time, we'll,
We'll come back, we are nowhere definitive at this point.
it's not,
We still need more information before we can even get close to that. Okay, what is your pleasure to do? We are at 1:30. What would you like to spend, because we have now gone through that as far as we know, did they send something
They
back?
just did, and they said, yeah, they'd meet us here at 2 o'clock.
Okay,
So we had a half hour, and I actually have one more thing.
okay.
Sorry, I was like.
And actually, it's over.
Sign.
And actually, I don't think it's anything that we haven't already talked about. I just don't think we talked about it informally, and we didn't put it in the formal point.
is it gonna post it?
Yeah, I don't think it got a posted or a sticky,
Sorry.
And that was that the standards should reflect more of the human perspective of social studies.
Yes.
We talked about it, but I don't think we ever made that formal. And so one thing, to go back to our process, one thing I think would be good for us is when we look at this square, that these be written in a way that they reflect the human perspective of the social studies. And it might, and I'd even offer the suggestion, it might be as simple as adding on to each one of these, at the end of each one of these, in their daily lives as citizens. So if you were to read the whole thing, it would be, in social studies, students in Missouri public schools will acquire a solid foundation, which includes knowledge of, and we'll take the first one, principles expressed in the document shaping constitutional democracy in the United States in their daily lives as citizens. Might be sufficient enough to tie that together.
I appreciate that at least implies current events usage too, that
So to try to
I
make
think
it relevant, to make it
that's missing in the same way that.
geography, then is in their daily lives. So it's personal. And then we could also add that citizen part.
I think it's a good point, I think even if you don't just add the citizens part, so, when talking about geography, the people or the students or the family or that human factor, from what I've been looking at is big, and I think social studies is about people, you don't have any of this. And then I think when kids and parents read it, they're going to be able, again, to relate better. We write our objectives, students will be able to, by the end of the class, or the end of the week, or whatever. This is gonna be more along those lines, we'll have more of a connection, and hopefully a vested value in it.
So it'll make it more user friendly, I guess, and where people can have a better understanding, like you said, parents and even students to a certain extent to read that and understand what that is expected of them in their daily life as a citizen.
I agree with what you were talking about earlier, I completely agree. Actually, one of the things I'm even wondering, that I don't see is, how do we define social studies? I think there almost even needs to be a clear definition of what we mean when we talk about social studies. Like here it just says, in social studies, students of Missouri public schools will acquire a solid foundation. But what exactly are we meaning by social studies? Because I know now in high school, it'll be like what's the difference between social studies, social sciences, are they all the same, is it just history? I think there needs to be almost an idea of this is what social studies and I don't know where it even kind of comes from, but I think that's where we come out doing it from the human, talking about people and the idea of studying how people interact, and that may mean that, I think some of that can become almost a definition of what we're talking about when we look at social studies.
I know the National Council has a definition.
That's what I was actually, because I thought I read it just a second ago, but I can't figure out where I found
The
it. So I just read
integrated
it.
study of social sciences and promote civic competence.
Something I think that lays it out. I think that lays it out.
That's American National Council of the Social Studies, for the social studies.
Great.
Concur.
I actually jotted something down this morning when we were talking about it a little bit, and I took the top of the social studies part. In social studies, students in Missouri public schools will acquire a solid foundation of rights and responsibilities as citizens of their community, state, and country, which includes knowledge of the 97 standards.
Would you make a copy of that or just,
Can you remind it?
And you're taking that out of the map, kind of all the same.
Yeah, worded social studies right here, this part right here, and it just,
Right.
words selected in there.
And you notice how under topics it says knowledge in, proficiency in,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of it is knowledge.
yeah, I kind of wondered about just having knowledge.
There's a whole page that I should have
The application.
on another site.
Yeah,
Well,
I
the
think that
application is the other side, it's the content, and then the other side is the process application. That's why we were at this one.
Okay. Kind of thinking about,
No, not this time.
so come back at your proposal again, honestly, and word that.
Yeah, I would like the standards.
Did you have a specific standard you wanted rewritten? I thought you used a standard that you added to.
Well, the big picture is, I think our social studies standards should reflect more the human perspective in interaction. And then there's lots of ways we could go at that. Either a definitional statement of what social studies is. We could amend the ones that are here to include something that reflects daily lives. So there's lots of ways to go at it. I think that it would be important as we look to revise the standards, that we make sure that we include the human perspective in the standards more.
So social studies standards should reflect the human perspective. You need it to be more.
I'm comfortable with that, and for us to work that out, how that plays out, if we all agree.
All those who support that. Those who don't, and abstain. Okay, so this will be up there, college, and more.
I do not. That was it. You can all breathe a sigh of relief. Nope, that was it. Actually, I can check out. And those were all ones I think we talked about, but we didn't put on a post-it. So.
Okay, what we will do is we'll take pictures of all of our pages, and she's written what's on the post-its, but our post-its are just delineating color-wise where we are. But we'll take pictures of those and then forward them to everybody, so you have a copy of what we've done with this already. So that can give you some ponder time if you wish to take it between now and next meeting.
Will Bessie, or someone send you who's supposed to be on the committee? Will they send that to us? How will we get this information to our new?
As soon as the new people are appointed, I'm going to request they send them to me, And then I'm just gonna send them, or you could do it, Craig, whichever you prefer. A general update of what we have done so far, the pictures of our posters, show them how to get on to the video so that they can view the video, give them a couple resources that aren't on there where they can access those. And then I'll just include them as the minutes that everybody gets. Unless you prefer doing it, which is not a problem.
No, I don't have to do that by any means. A thought I had, I know if they come down to two, you thought another, 20 seconds. Is there a body of work that all of us know about that we should start to resource between now and when we come back, or between now and when we come back in the next time, that we can go to? All of you are pulling on different social studies sites. Some I know, I'm an NCSS member, so I use that site mainly. I use Library of Congress for lots of things, but that's mainly primary source kind of stuff. So is there a place that we can share, or do we send them, hit reply from the email she sent them to her, we get one list, and then send them.
I know y'all are funny, but if you have, if you have Google, you can share, I can open a Word document, share with everybody, give everybody editing rights, and you just go at your own convenience, and it's kind of like conversation on paper.
Yeah, like Google Drive, like in Google Drive.
Right, just a document in Google Drive, and this shared, so it's like a Word document, but Googleized,
Yes.
and you click share, and then we all have access.
Or you can actually put Word documents.
I could,
Right,
I could put for all that I do, and I can share those in the iCloud, just saying. I think that would be best, because I hate reply all emails,
Does
and I
everybody
just
have
send y'all
Google Drive?
some reply all email.
Yeah, Google Drive.
You can, okay, you don't use it,
Yeah.
you choose not to use it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't use one.
Google Drive.
Google Drive.
Well, I do know.
Well, we can
Can we,
Google Drive and then email what we've set up, like,
so
at the end of the week, maybe?
would that work for you?
That's fine.
Okay, so if we do Google Drive, we put in our resources,
Absolutely.
copy it and paste it.
You want me to do it real quick?
Tell me what Google Drive is.
So all it is you're working on a document. It's like, okay, you have a flash drive that you would stick in a computer. Okay, so Google just has everything for you online. It's web-based. So if I click share a document, we can all sit here at one time and access the same thing.
And
But know that if you're changing it, you're changing it forever.
You are.
You can lose a lot of
You
information.
can.
We were in the middle of Ashland meetings
We can Google chat
last
too.
year, brand new principal, assistant principal sitting there. And
Well,
she
I get
actually the whole document, there's 40 of us looking at it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was great. We accessed it.
I've got Dropbox. Somebody
It's
Dropbox.
really quick.
I believe so.
It was terrific.
yeah, I mean, essentially, it's essentially a cloud, wherever you use, it stores it in a cloud. And then
That's
you
what
can,
Dropbox is.
Just
Yeah.
collaborate.
and so then, so you share things and you can have things that are shared with you, and you can just all work on it and you can see it. And then, I have it on my computer and on my phone, I have it so that.
Yeah.
Like my favorite, which I use it for, is I have an ideas document, so as I'm driving and thinking of random things, I type it in there on, when I stop.
When you die, so to
Yeah,
say.
Or school or whatever. I will write it in there, and then it will, as soon as I stop, I'll put it in there, and then I can pull it up on my computer when I get home, I can pull it up at work, and it's all in the same document. But I stop.
Can you say each entry is a document itself?
And you
So
want
you can rename it. So if you have the original, you work on it, and then you
So what I'm,
rename it, you can have the,
right, so you're gonna make a copy for yourself,
mhm.
and that will be what you have to work on. So when I send stuff to students, I don't do editing rights, I just shoot them on a copy.
Mhm.
They copy it for themselves, edit it all, and then shoot it back to me.
Okay.
I do think it's important for transparency though, that whether anyone in the group chooses to use it or not, everyone has access to it, so it's not like separate information going on.
Right.
Which kind of made me think of Norm in terms of work later down the road. I think it would be important that any work that we do here as a group, that if we get to the point, at some point where we want to make smaller work group chunks, that's something that the group decides will happen, and it's not that somebody else else is over here working on something else, and then they bring it and say, hey, how about this, guys, I worked on it for 2 weeks. I think that helps it all be a common agenda rather than individual agendas. I just think that's important for down the road.
Great.
And all this is resources, so like if parents don't know about the National Association of Social Studies or whatever, right? Is that my understanding?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So it's kind of like the best Google that we have in our brain.
Right, so there's the National Health Council for Social Studies, there's Center for Civic Ed, Club has
Oh,
lots
that's
of things.
You
There's
can just use your Google
I-
Docs.
every disciplinary subject within social studies has its own professional society, so whether it's the American History Association or the National Geographic Alliance, I mean, they've all created documents that say what within their discipline they think is best practice and what students should know and be able to do at different grade levels, almost many of them.
Do we want to
So
take an
these are huge.
afternoon break and then come back and meet with our other group?
Right, so we'll meet
And
the other group, and I think our liaison should present our work.
Absolutely.
And this is not one thing you can delegate.
Did you want
Yeah, I think that's all, yeah. Well, I'd like to first start off by doing this delegate.
I'd like to introduce you to my co-liaisons.
Co-liaison. I won't be really removed from my co-liaison will be doing the detail work.
Before our break, before Craig rampantly prepares himself, Kathy would like to actually add that to our memos if the group agrees. Would you like to state it again?
I think if everyone agrees, I think that's just important, so that it's transparent work, that whoever comes in, our work is very transparent.
So there's nobody doing,
Yeah.
how should we just say, work will be transparent, would that cover it?
And shared to all members of the.
Shared with all members of the group,
Okay,
agreed upon and shared, I guess, but
Okay.
what work we do is agreed upon, but
work is transparent.
whatever. That's right,
Is transparent and shared with all members of the group, that's what we end up saying. Very good, Mr. This is to be added to our memo.
Well,
You need to
group is one definition,
For the
and
best of our abilities.
here working is a different.
present members.
What did you say, Julie?
I
So I'm
just
gonna share this with y'all, and then you can tell me if it didn't work.
suggested that we put the group in.
Didn't work.
I'm not thinking it.
Still not working.
Go back to your 5 days, I guess.
Still not working.
Thank you for the update. Yes, and.
I'm going to share our work, our written work with everyone, but
Yeah.
the meetings that take place should be.
We have, I mean, I'm keeping track of who's in each meeting and so forth. Would you like me to send that back out to you? Is that just-
Maybe I'm just one of these, I don't know how to access the notes or the video. Do you have that?
We're gonna email you a copy of the notes, and the video will be on the DESI website.
Do you know where, that's the,
I have no clue, but I can find that out and let you know.
Just email us.
It's got better,
Can you
it's got
email us
better,
so
but that's the website,
It'd be much
that's like, that's better.
It is hard to maneuver.
I will say it takes large strides,
Yeah.
but the first it was. That's the website.
Trying to make sure what my Google
Okay,
address is.
Yeah, you're gonna have to give me Google if you don't mind.
I've got one, I've got two, the one at school does not accept outside people. But I've got,
See, I have my personal and my
right, so I'm
school
gonna use
both
my,
connected to the
I'm
same.
gonna use my other one.
oh, you did good.
Yeah, I just use my first one.
I believe. Now, do I have to have a Google ID?
Mine does both.
No,
Yeah,
you
if you
should.
don't have a G, well,
You
I've got a
should,
Gmail account.
if you share it,
if you have a Gmail account, then you're good. You should be.
but you should be able to do it anyway.
I did, and I just think it works. I was gonna say, you can
Look
get
at
it
the
in, it's
online
gonna be.
evaluation system, just
You'll
look
know
at that.
how.
Eventually.
There's trades. Well, it's awesome.
I have so many like
And then when you guys pop up, you'll see at the top, like, your first letter, yeah, there you go. Your name will pop up with a letter, and whatever you type in as in pink, your letter will now be a different color. So since we're all over, this would be a good idea too.
I got mine.
Oh, sweet.
So did you use our email addresses?
I used whatever she sent to
Yeah,
us.
mine's gonna be
The first one.
Okay, then what I'm gonna let you do is type it in on there, and then you can just share.
Mine is different.
And on that original one I sent, I'm gonna send you another one because I had a misspelling on parent and I had a misspelling on son, so I'll send you a new one.
And Tanya, if you want like the up-to-date, you don't wanna do a Gmail account, right?
Right.
Okay, so I can,
I don't wanna make it difficult.
no, it's not gonna be difficult at all, but I'm just thinking like, by Friday, if we all log in and at least put one resource, and then you just email me, I'll just share this with you,
Okay,
and
and
you
I
can see
can
what we've
just,
got.
so if I have something I want to put on it, I would just email it to you.
Yeah, that's fine too.
She just put it on. You-
Yeah.
I,
Whatever works. Like I said, it's just resources, so you're not Googling social studies,
So I
K-5.
requested access from you.
I'm
If
not gonna
there
do
are,
that. Just 'cause it's you?
PCR tomorrow.
What Norm? I don't see any Norms. Norm, isn't it?
I can send me, oh wait, that's your people invitation. I
if
can
there is
reply
a,
all and send me,
certain set of
here's your
standards,
work group.
if I see three
That would be great. And so she's
Yeah.
not gonna email everybody all the time.
Okay, I'm gonna reply to Laura's Google invitation with the link to Desi that's all of the work group, updates, video links and all that stuff is there.
Oh, okay.
All one word.
Guys, I'm passing out my card in case you think of, like, I know I need to find out what, she's been on where the videos are gonna be, so that's great. But, and I'm gonna find out about the goals. But if you think of other resources or things that you want me to have when we meet the next time, this is, that's the reason I'm giving you my card. You can get a hold of me either by email or if you think last minute, my phone, and I'll try to have them.
They sent you the outstanding schools.
And if
Because we
you,
were talking about this.
anytime someone, you can put it in part of your settings, but anytime someone adds to the document or takes off, or you post a fact, it'll shoot us an email saying, hey, Pam just posted on this document, and then we know, so we can go in and check it. So you're not stuck emailing us constantly, like your resources.
How much was your hotel? Mine came up with the
So y'all boot me off the item.
T 7051.
Those are come up now, like,
Well, I'm not good at separating. And for those of you who would like,
Just in case you need to represent in a conversation with these folks.
some of the groups wanted to know sunshine law.
Oh, I got that.
Here's the Attorney General stack of, I've got a whole stack here. So if you want sunshine law stuff, here it is. Some of it doesn't apply, some of it does, so.
It would apply mostly if we wanted to have, meetings that were not these that are scheduled, or been posted, we have to post it so many days ahead.
Right.
And or if we wanted to use teleconferencing, you have to make that on video.
I'm not rating you.
My Kentucky that comes out.
Sir?
And there's also a question, I don't know that it applies to us, but if you want to know, the Common Core has a royalty-free, anyway, it's,
Let me explain.
yeah, explain it, because I don't know.
There were some people who thought that in the group that were addressing the Common Core, they said, we can't make changes to the Common Core because it's copyrighted. And what it has is it has what's called a creative copyright, which on a creative copyright, your site is copyrighted, so you can't sell it to somebody or use it for personal gain, but you can amend it, change it. And that was the question that came out.
Well, that's a huge question. One of the big things against Common Core is that it's copyrighted by someone else. So that's a big
But,
issue.
yeah, but it can be changed.
No, you're good, you're so curriculum, I'm just like, I try to do that. Parent, teachers, student, kids, just get it on there.
I love you, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Number thinking. Yes.
I was just thinking about having it up before they come.
Did you get this. Are you Google?
Yeah.
Did you get access?
That's
Okay.
good. Here,
And then there's just their emails and Oh, perfect.
I put in
we
my
have two queries. Are you, we have two queries? Are you both with them?
The one that Chillicothe is not correct.
Ah.
Oh, can I get rid of that one?
Yeah.
Alright. Anybody else not?
Was that Toby?
Somebody
Okay, I have
said,
two.
why am I getting
What's,
all this?
oh, there's,
Mr. T.
got you down at Chillicothe.
That would be one.
Great. More information.
This is,
That's the.
I have it in the you should. Are you good now? Sweet. Okay.
Just a question, other groups, I think I'm gonna need it. I know, why don't you scan these all in for us, Laura? And then.
It won't take any time at all.
After the electronic.
Well, you know what, if I just add them to this Google doc that we're sharing. So what do we want?
There you go, yes.
Good.
Should we
And
share
all
a
that stuff
folder?
could be in there electronically.
That would be ideal.
Upload
I'm
all of
thinking
that
if this is
over.
just,
Okay, so you can
This
share
first
folder.
How's that gonna translate to non-people that drive users?
We'll have to, I guess, print them.
well,
No, this is
they're
just,
already.
we're just using public stuff. We're just saying, so when we're sitting on the computer, we can click between resources and standards and this, and this.
That way if you don't want to.
Like, if I don't wanna bring all this paper next week, and then I can copy these as my own, and I can highlight and comment and shred and drag.
Do we want to,
You gotta take pictures of those.
I will.
Yes, I think so.
Because we were gonna do that, but you could do it and add it in there and then make sure she gets an email.
I don't know if I have these skills. No. Yes, ma'am.
We want you better and better. If you're gonna be the Google Maestro.
No, I said, I haven't signed a
oh, you
contract
got
with them yet,
Chromebook.
but I'm just saying.
You got Chromebook.
It's supposed to be, I can do this. Okay. Oh, yeah, let's see.
Oh, we gonna attempt to lay out our scope of work for the next meeting?
I don't think we do anything that's being done with one of the blue letter.
Yeah, I wondered about that too.
And then I think we start a conversation. Through email, they said that many changes, they said you can't change.
We can ask for.
Maybe we submit,
Yeah.
right, maybe we submit to them, maybe we submit to the liaison, ideas to the agenda. And then maybe between, Pam and Craig, we can list something afterwards. As you start getting too many chiefs and other emails. Not that it would be.
But between now and then, what we are doing is looking at resources and adding them to the Google Doc.
I'm hoping,
Okay.
so that when we get ready to do this, we should all have
Lots of resources.
plethora of background information. That's the biggest thing.
Okay, we've got lists. On the computer. It is like everything else in the digital age, there's so much out there. Be careful not to get too bogged down on it. The National Council for Economic Educators said. Because they have. They have materials, they have standards.
Probably school back then.
gonna start on anything, how much this we're gonna do.
It should just come from the right.
So you're using just share.
What's on the wall? I think we started with a process, we said we started with how we actually started with these, and we wanted to look at it from a bigger, like the bigger industry standards piece, and really going through those and determining some of it from a really big perspective. Even just to making sure that, all the way down to trying to figure out when we talk about social studies, that's like we can talk about what are all the different things that we see as part of social studies, what are the things that we're seeing it for, and then, then we started to get into some of the pieces, right, and then I would, I think we got involved with it.
It's not good.
Maybe someday. There's hope.
That's so awesome.
There you go.
I don't know what the
There you go. Did you see that?
Yeah, we will have fun. I'm sorry for the longest time. So does the. So no. Okay. You're kidding. No, thanks. Yeah, I would bring it on.
If I get people's names.
Fifth grade. Yeah. I saw it in 2 years, that's what. Well, that's for you, in 2 years. Did you get a picture? So you play all of that.
We had crumb cards and then last year we had one instead of three.
Did you take a picture of it?
Yeah, and I already sent them to Toby, he's putting it in. And then. He is, they'll be on the, we just embedded them in there one to one.
But not making it.
Maybe
Yeah.
my.
But it's good.
How many people are there? Sorry, I can't hear you. Does anybody know how many are in that group?
I did 13.
I thought maybe we could spin our kids around.
I was gonna bring kids over. How did you do that? They are so. Well, what was it? There was some. Organized it, Chris and Brittany.
Thank you very much.
No.
I just say,
Okay, so in going to.
You can get a regular.
And we were talking about.
Make sure that-
Samsung to do it like
3 or 4 years ago, when they told us,
Craig is right. Craig is right.
Yeah.
And had your name by it, but don't worry about it.
Economics and geography, it was very.
Anybody else get it?
That's right.
Oh, that's
And
right.
then the next unit is.
Okay, are you here?
She took pictures of the work we did today, and there will be in the notes. When you get the notes, it'll be in there, she makes them separate.
Right. Okay, so they're just examples of
Even more.
Even more.
Oh, right, right. So just some examples of how it's been done. Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And that's probably when they changed that word.
You're welcome. Come in.
We're slowly trickling.
That's fine. Have a seat.
We have to factor to the rest
Yeah,
of the.
Yes.
You guys always did really nice too.
It was at lunch.
So we asked you to come down here to figure out your way out of the building.
We are. We're
We're following you too. We didn't want to have to go up and then come back down.
Okay.
Just trying to save ourselves some stuff. So.
Okay. So I yeah, she had told me that. Oh my God,
How many are in your group?
Give it to me.
So we have enough seats here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Did you hear this?
I think it's fine.
I got Roxanne this morning to me.
I think it's perfectly fine.
I initially
She wants to wear it.
Okay.
I didn't do that.
Should be ENR same.
I reset it and then put the other A. There's two A's, right?
There is. And
Okay.
I have one student that will put two A's in. Most students
I have some.
have
Yeah, I think those would be excellent.
But for some reason, I'm like, really? So it's confusing. I get most of these.
Yeah, I reset it, so that's.
We have a couple more numbers that we're picking up.
No worries. Because we're staying till 5, so it doesn't matter.
He's saying
Then
they're
the
fine.
next
You guys are going to third.
I just keep that at times that you are.
Do you have a 2.5?
Everyone
No
say that.
leaves, the whole document ready.
That's right, no one
We're
leaves.
doing a 20-day lock-in.
The security's coming. In fact, this is a big trap. You trap us all together.
No.
As soon as the last person comes in, the door locks. We don't come out, so it's standing there.
No, that's up there, top. We say we come back to that. The second one was about it was interdiscipline, we talked about intra, and then we talked about the goals, whether or not it is right to incorporate. So we were putting in
I got it.
Careful of that thing, guys. The latest letter. She found out. I think. She moved on. It's not even as
I can do that for sure. So make sure it wasn't. Like we would say, you say, well, I didn't know. Make sure we got it right.
They know each other.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're gonna have an intervention here.
It makes the process more fun.
And these are the last ones.
Okay,
Get started.
there's just, we see walkers all the time, so it's like the Walking Dead here. It's it's like, they're just zombies that keep passing by, so we never know who's.
I will say on our room in the 8th floor, the other conference room below, we hear all their conference calls. Like whoever they are, we don't
There
know.
also, there's a lady knitting a quilt down there, so. Stitching quilts.
I just like to do this.
So are we all here?
Yes.
I think all this
Missing
going to.
some of our group, but. I
Oh, we
think
still
they
missing.
have to, well,
I don't think we can win.
Yeah.
one is in a meeting and one had to leave early, so this is most of us.
Alrighty.
Well, when I come over to talk to you at lunch, that'd be a good idea. Thanks for coming down this morning to offer to meet with us, and then came back to talk to the group, and we did think it's a good idea before we separate, for however long is it, 10 days or so, to find out, just basically get a brief of what you've been working on the last couple of days, and then we were going to share the same sort of thing. Just to get a sense of the direction that the two different committees are, since at some point, hopefully we're going to merge or at least dovetail together to provide some sort of scope and sequence for our standards. And so I appreciate you coming down. We offered for you to come here because that's on your way out of the building. So it wasn't any resistance to us wanting to come to you. It's just we didn't want to have to walk up the stairs and then come back down. So it's economy of effort. That's all. Just economy of effort.
And economics is a part of social.
That's right. So if you would like to share what you've been working on.
We kind of elected Jamie to be one of our spokespeople, spokesperson for just giving an understanding of what we.
Appreciate that.
So, and we were kind of working through this visual because of our approach, we first looked through the 7 main standards that would have been, on the placemat. We kind of talked through those. And as we started looking at it, what we decided would be a good upgrade to the current system is to try to align by course, where each standard, if you will, gets progressively more sophisticated over time as students age. And try to put that together in a way that teachers could see a little more easily than what they're seeing now. So we kind of flipped the arrangement of the current standards, and then we needed a visual. I'm sorry, because we were working on this. So if you will, yeah, you can get the easel here. So one of the standards.
That's active teaching learning, right?
Was the first one. We went in order. We're very creative. We did number 1 first. Principles in documents that shape our republic was that first standard. We said, for now, we like it. We don't have a reason to unlike it. At this point, we may revisit when we get through this whole process. And then we took then grade 6, 7, 8. And then, of course, in the high school, it's not always offered at the same grade. So then we talk about it in terms of a course. So there's a world history course, an American history course, and a government course that can be offered anywhere in high school. And we chose those 3 in particular because those are the courses required by the state. So every single high school student has to take those courses. And so what we did then is we started working through in this one single, we got through one part of one stream today. One part of one stream. What would it look like moving from 6th grade all the way through high school?
Can I back up for just a second? I'm sorry. What we're looking at is the current Missouri Learning Standards.
Yes.
That's what we are just using that as sort of a template idea to just get us started. We need some kind of reference point, so that is a reference point from which we have been working from, but we are not necessarily saying we're not going to be looking at other reference points as we are going to be on our own. So for now, we were just using that, and I thought maybe they would.
No, that's absolutely so. But we just felt like we needed a place to ground ourselves from. So we thought it made sense to start with where we were, organize it in a way that we knew we wanted to go, and then we've already started brainstorming several other key professional reference documents that we're going to use to revise fill in gaps, make adjustments. You know, but we're kind of envisioning then if this is our, you know, principles in document shaping, then, you know, we're gonna do the next column, would do the economics, we would do geography, we would do the history. I don't have them all memorized, that's bad, right, after 2 days of this, but we'll keep going out here on the side, and then each time we really wanted to spell out what that progression and sophistication. So, you know, we kind of started in 6th grade, we'd be asking students to identify. By the time we move into high school, we're looking at evaluating, and so we're moving in that progression of thinking, sophistication throughout the course.
And
So-
I'm just a parent, so I'm not the expert, but I know, and I do not want there to be any kind of human or oh, thank you, Glenn. Okay, totally lost it. Yes, what was I going to say?
Two worlds, speaking two
Yes,
languages.
coming from two worlds as the parent, and then you have the experts. We have managed to work through quite a lot over the last 2 days, and have found a very comfortable working environment. I believe, would you all say that we're in a very comfortable place? I'm very thankful for that. And I do appreciate the expertise of everyone that has been in our group. Mary, Dr. Burton also included in that. But you know, when I say current Missouri learning standards, for social studies, it's not a part of any copyrighted standard. These are not a part of Common Core, and I know there's been a lot of debate in other work groups in relationship to that. So we are kind of out of the fray, shall I say, when it concerns that dialogue and that debate in our group, which makes it somewhat easier to move forward.
One of the simple tasks, that it's not really simple, but the structure of how the current GLEs, CLEs, grade level are put together, it's on this vertical document. We just felt like that was hard to see, hard to look at, so we had some really good conversations about how that would look if we did a little more horizontally, and then being able to plug it in, just helping it be usable and practical from a visual perspective, maybe even using color coding of some type. And we're still very early on, but to see what things are in every strand, what things are separate. But that's one of our charges.
Did you have a question earlier? I thought I saw your hand.
Oh, I was just actually going back through it. I guess I was under the assumption, I'm most familiar with the GLEs,
Right, of course.
which are pretty structured in the sense of developmental sophistication. And I wasn't aware that the GLEs weren't already developed that way.
Yes and no. What we found as you go through 6th, 7th, 8th, and then the high school component is there wasn't necessarily a scope and sequence that was very well articulated.
Right.
And oftentimes there might have been a verb that indicated another level of thinking depth, if you will, but yet it didn't really go into what kids were supposed to do with that. So it might say analyze, but analyze to do what? And so we really started looking at what is it we really want kids to do at each level that kind of adds to or deepens their thinking. So in essence, as Jamie said, you know, we began with identify, but then started moving deeper in that cognitive process that kids have to do to think about the principles, you know, or to think about the history and what they're showing or learning, or what they have, how they're acting in their civic life or in college or career outside of the school walls. And so that's where we started to really start to define and tighten up that vertical alignment from 6 to 12.
As we were trying to go through the documents and line them up, I think we were all getting kind of frustrated with this one ends and then branches and what is going on here. And we kind of came up with the ESOL work over here and working through that. And then when we got that perspective, we were all able to kind of drill into the topics and what is this trying to do, what's missing, what's out of that. And I think we did pretty good.
And Dan's role is also as a parent, and I think that his input and insight was very valuable to our group as to just where we put some words and some things. So
And then Brian was working on the template, is that already said? Just to change what that format.
Not for Brian.
I thought, you know what, it was a brilliant idea. We talked about how people typically read from left to right, and so we thought maybe the way that
The keys as they look now, they discourage connection of topics that they can put in a class. And so we want them to look for educators, not all of whom have a nice curriculum department or things like that, so they can see in this grade level, as we do this content, we're gonna address economics and geography and all of these things within that course. And so we're just now that shifting of alignment, making it more horizontal. This is the grade level, and here's our strands, and so we're gonna address these strands throughout that grade level, and then we still have that integration that we're working on. And to your point earlier, you know, when we do have a progression that's indicated, but a lot of times it's just the same language, we just change one word, and in some places we even shift what the kids are doing, and we look across, and so we wanted to keep that what the kids are doing the same concept, but in each grade level we wanted it to truly be something deeper, not just we're going to explain to analyze, just change the word and say that better. So
would sixth grade be identify all the way across?
No,
Okay, I
no,
was like,
we only done,
Principal one.
we've done principal one of one, like, and there's like 4 of one and like 10 of 3 and like,
we just started working with that
We-
sixth grade.
yeah,
concept.
we've
right.
done
You
one
said
of like
something
7
that
of 8, I think.
The difference between K through 5, when you're looking at that government piece, is once you get into sixth grade, you're really going deeper into the principles themselves. So being able to, so now you have a deeper concepts related to what they were leaving earlier. So you need to start at a lower cognitive level so that they can grasp it, so then we can move deeper again. So that's why, in that particular piece.
Do you guys have more questions? We would love to hear what you guys are doing, or if you think any of our work is gonna jive with your work.
Well, it sounds like it will. Do you mind introducing yourselves so we can know who you are? That would be great. And just tell your connection to the committee and like your experience or something, just so we have an idea. Let me start over here.
Okay, I'm Brian Schultz, I'm in the school district. Kathy's my buddy. And I work with the 6th through 12th grade teachers in my school district to implement curriculum and assessments in social studies. And so about 50 teachers in 8 buildings that I work with.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Dr. Mary Byrne, and I live government and civics. I drafted the bill before it was put in the hands of legislatures. I'll just tell you now, the structure is that the outstanding school tax statutes were the origin of the language, and then because of, you might say, differences of opinion as to the contemporary application of those statutes, language had to be changed. And because of the situation in that, standards were adopted outside of the process of our statutes, in that our statutes specified that the majority of the members of the work groups developing our standards had to be active classroom teachers of the state. And clearly, the standards that were being adopted were constructed in a very different way by non-governmental organizations. So the reason for the lobbying in the last year and a half was to say, no, the process violated our statutes. And they were done without informed consent because they were agreed to before they were written. And they were done without due process, which would have referred to our statutes and said, no, this isn't a fit for how we believe our children's education should be developed. So 1490 was passed, and we're here today.
I'm Julie Thomas, I'm from Lake Ozarks. And I'm a parent. Just leave it at that.
Dan Harvey, St. Charles, I'm a parent, and I've had a child in the Francis Howell School District for the last 20 years. So we're on our last round at the moment. 3 kids, well spaced. And,
So you
So I-
budget for that.
yes, so I've had an ongoing developmental perspective on the curriculum that's been going through. So I'm enjoying being here.
I'm Jamie Manker. I'm a social studies teacher in Rockwood School District. I'm the social studies department chair there, and I also am the 2014 Teacher of the Year.
Missouri Teacher of the Year, not Rhode
Well, both, sorry. Well, we have a 2015. He's great too.
I'm Jessica Diewald. I am a social studies educator. Actually, K through 12. I have experience in teaching middle school and high school social studies, but working with curriculum instruction K through 12 in the Rockwood School District as well. And had really had a great couple of days of conversations going on and seeing social studies in action. Really, it's been kind of exciting.
I'm Alex Coinga, assistant professor of social studies education at St. Louis University, and I'm the representative of the Department of Higher Ed. Steve Pryor, I'm assistant principal at Washington High School, former social studies teacher, and representing the Missouri Association of Secondary School Principals.
Aaron Schumake, I'm a secondary teacher.
I'm Patrick Fisher. I'm the principal at Wildhorse Elementary, also in the Rockwood School District.
What a rough one here.
Craig Carson, I am assistant superintendent in Ozark, Missouri, and I got my doctorate.
Judy Garland, member of the Board of Education for Public Schools.
Rob Chester from Iberia.
Alden Craddock, associate professor of school social studies education at Maryville University, St. Louis.
I'm here in Farmington School District, 13th year in special education. Currently, I work with the social studies department at high school.
Kathy Wilson, I've been with the Lance and I do K-5 social studies, but I'm also a parent of 4 children in the grades. Think through that capacity as well.
Good. And I think the majority of us, Julie has kids that are out.
And a husband that was a social studies teacher for life.
Right. And Ralph has kids that are out. The rest of us, all
You
have.
said Iberia.
So we have 2 to 4 kids, all of us, and 2 to 6. That's
One
right.
more from six.
And so, yesterday, we looked at what we consider graduation expectations for successful or well-rounded social studies students. And a lot of rich conversation. It was a good conversation. And we looked through, so what are today's expectations versus yesteryear? And there was a lot of good conversation. Today we went through the 7 content standards in place map. And we spent the greater part of today just going through them one at a time. And what we were looking through, I'm about to start singing. What we were looking at is what of those 7 standards need to be amended or changed or not? Are they just fine the way they are? As a group, we decided what you all decided. We decided that it's a good place to start. It may not be the end place, but it's a good place to start. We are familiar with it. And a question in our mind is, think of in 2 years, when Missouri teachers get all brand new standards, what a sea of change for them to try to get their minds wrapped around instruction. An elementary teacher with 4 core content areas that have changed in some way, big or small. So if we can try to keep somewhat of the same framework in how it looks and feels for the K-5 teacher, then that's one less brand new piece. because as we as teachers sometimes overwhelm. So that's a consideration that social studies education, all subject education will take a dip when they get this sea of new things that they've got to do. So it's something to consider. So the 7 considerations that we have are on the board here. We think that there needs to be an additional emphasis on citizenship included all the way through. How that looks, it could be written into the STEM, it could be written into each individual standard, but we definitely need to had a great discussion about that. The inquiry standards should be kept current and evident throughout the GLEs. So how are kids using the tools of inquiry? I think it says dictionary and,
Right, so maybe,
yeah.
maybe we need some.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yes, so they need massage for sure. Then incorporate global awareness in the developmentally appropriate manner across various strands. And even though that sounds, I don't know what word I'm looking for, globally aware could sound like we're getting too crazy. It's really thinking through the broad area of how do we fit in the context of the world, because we lose that at elementary. At 5th grade, well, 6th grade, we pick up China, and we've really not dealt with how does China fit into the context of the world up until that point. So there's a conceptual misunderstanding for kids, or at least they have to climb further to get to where they understand. So how do we fit in that global awareness of where we are versus where the world is? We talked about the final product needs to include agreed upon terms that are consistent throughout the document. And so the next one is really a piece of that. The first strand uses the word republic, and then in the other document it says constitutional democracy. So what are we? Are we one or the other? So that has to be decided, and one of our goals as a group is to look between now and 10 days when we get back, so we can have a really good discussion about which of those two are we, and how are we planning forward to meet that.
So my question right now, I mean, it's not, I mean, I want to have a broad understanding of what you're doing. I don't like the words that you're using with global awareness, because that's geographical to me. I think that's strange, if I can say that. That language to me is troubling. And I also am troubled by what you just shared, big time, about a question as to our system of government that's been well established as how we've operated for 200 years. So it sounds to me very not factual, but politically motivated. And I would be really concerned about that. So
The placemat document is worded the same as the GLEs.
and the placement document comes
This.
from, right, you have that.
And that's why we just want to clarify why there's a discrepancy between the two
And
documents.
then what's in the statute that originally says constitutional democracy? What's in the GLEs says republic? Go ahead.
I think that one of them says.
This
No,
is
it's that way.
constitutional.
Okay,
That's
sorry.
right. No, that's
The
right.
GLEs say republic.
And that would be an error in thinking, because clearly the founders said we were a republic.
So that's the part we need to talk about next time we get together. None of us prepared to have that conversation, but we all
I don't think
agree.
it's a conversation you need to have. It's what we pledge to every day. Pledge allegiance to the Republic of the United States of America, and it is still the law of the land.
But
It is
they're
not
looking,
a change that we are to
We're just talking,
incorporate in our standards.
we're looking at the
Looking at
document that we need to have some consistency in what's on there.
Right,
they're looking at the placemat itself that has that in it,
right.
then at some point.
Then the placemat needs to go.
Well, that's what.
Okay.
It's just like it matches that teacher, but this one says republic.
Yeah.
And then the one says something different, but they refer to the same thing. So for a teacher who's using that curriculum, or a parent who's looking at it, it's different in two places.
Well, what
So it's
she
just a
said,
conversation, a clarification of what.
there's a difference between having a conversation and deciding what we are and editing your documents to be consistent. That's what she said.
As part
Duly
of,
noted, thank you. So,
and as part of that discussion, it was approximately 2 years ago, the standard that is currently titled Principles of the Republic was actually titled Principles of the Constitutional Democracy.
That's a shame.
I was in on part of that
You don't mean
discussion.
the standard, you mean the
The GLEE.
glee.
The GLEE.
Okay, and that's why we're here
And
today.
the
And,
plays also.
and then somehow they changed.
Uh-huh.
We don't know who changed them. We don't know what the process was. But none of the actual GLEE under the standards underneath that GLEE changed.
It was just the category, yes.
No, that's why I love this process. You have the best minds in the state brought together, it's public, and it's an open forum. And so we don't make unilateral decisions. We come together as people from around the state and get to correct the past. And I'm thrilled.
It would be interesting to find out how the change occurred.
Who changed it and what?
I know it started with, or I don't know if it actually started there, but part of it was with a, forgive me on the name, the last name was Gerling.
Bill Gerling?
And Gretchen Loeb was involved, and I was involved a little bit with the, talking about constitutional democracy or a democratic republic when the Constitution and so forth is talking about a republic, constitutional republic. And as you go through particular founders and documents and discussions, they would use democracy and democratic and kind of a spirit of we need to have a democratic outlook and kind of a high level. But when they got into the substance of discussions, it was talking about Republican principles, Republican-minded, Republican spirit. And again, not, as I was saying earlier, this wave is even less than zero reference to anything having to do with the political party. It was just the terms being used.
Yeah, and Jefferson called it a democratical republic.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, we are the new experiment. And so you won't find this anywhere else. And that is, but I love.
But what I think where it came, as far as my involvement along with it, I think it ended that constitutional democracy wasn't quite right. It didn't really fit. And I was kind of excited when they got updated to showing republic, although it just says republic instead of a republic or the republic.
In order to maintain historical integrity, you do not change language. You keep words the way words were meant. And you are charged with the process of history. And so changing that word changes history. And you want to be ever mindful of that and respectful of those documents that have gone before us, those thought processes that have gone before us, and maintain that purity in that process. And be careful not to get caught up in sort of catchy new dialogue and how maybe the country wants to be run, or maybe ideologies want to change things today. Yes?
We fully understand that.
Okay.
And I'm going to speak for myself here. I kind of take offense to that because we came here to look at what we can do to improve the social studies part in this state. We simply pointed out there are two discrepancies, two different terms,
Okay.
and we need to decide what it is. Now, we are not, as a committee, going to decide which one we're going to use. That's going to be somebody else because somebody else already changed it. We're fully aware of what we're charged with. And that's one of the things that needs to be left alone at this time. We are working together to do this. And at this point, we have accomplished quite a bit. We're in the beginning stages of it. We all have the well-being of our students in our mind. That's why we're here. And we're fully aware of what we're charged with.
And I'm charged with the protection of history, and I'm in no disrespect because I have not been in your meetings, but when I heard some terminology coming up from over here, which I'm not exactly sure where the context of that is coming from, you must understand that we have been in a huge battle in this state and in this nation over curriculum, over history, and over standards. And so that's why you have some very passionate, very vocal, very confident people that were appointed to these groups, and it is not meant to run over anyone or to put anyone down. And I mean absolutely no disrespect, and I honor your service, and I can appreciate that.
Good. It seemingly felt like you're getting on to us, and we had the exact same conversations you're having.
Right.
So
fun.
Did you wanna continue with the?
I would love to. So, the next one is, social studies should support interdisciplinary learning instead of just silo information. And that's kind of what y'all are talking about
Yeah.
before,
We've used those terms.
Yeah, and so that was a conversation we had, and how do we include that? And then social studies standards should reflect the human perspective. It looks like a silo, but social is human, so how do we get the human perspective in there as well? Then we have two pieces that we really need to figure out, we'd like to work on before we come back in 10 days. One is the terminology issue, and the second one is on the placemat, we have the goal side of the placemat. Well, did the House bill only give us charge to look at this side, or is there charge to look at this side? This side tells us how to make things interdisciplinary. So it says 75, well, this is 73. So is it saying that this is no longer valid? And so for health and PE and fine arts, this is also no longer valid. That's a question that we need answered before we start our work next time. And so that's the next piece. So there's two sides to this, and we want to make sure that what we're doing honors both sides, and it kind of tells us how we're going to move forward as far as how do we plan to get citizenship inside there, because it's on the backside. Shoot.
Have you elected a chairperson for your group?
We
Right.
are,
Who is it that
the two of us,
you two?
yes.
Okay, so I would like to propose that I think the questions that you all have brought to the table are important to be addressed for both groups. So Steve is our chairperson, so I would like to propose that you guys communicate with each other so that we can all be abreast of the answers or the history behind some of this that we may not be aware of before both of our next meetings. If you don't mind doing that, that would be great.
We elected as a group to not meet on the second and third just because of time. It's too quick to turn around for some of our members. But we will be back on the 20th and 21st, so maybe get you an email or something, and you can update us on what your work came out of the second and third, where you are now.
Well, let me talk to you about cohesiveness in history and how, as parents, our kids come home and it's so fragmented, and how can we make that better for them? And for me personally, and I think for many people in the room, and also what I'm hearing is possibly trends even, sort of moving away some from the textbooks and giving opportunity for more maybe biography reads for history or autobiography reads in those requirements. Would you guys say that's accurate?
Well, so we have to be careful is that what you start to get into is those are some of the local issues, and so what we can come up with, there's certain things we can't go into how those things are actually specifically taught.
We discussed that, but as trying to make that as cohesive as possible, I think Jessica has some good insight today in the way she communicated the standards.
There is a possibility in support of teachers. We talked about why we need to format visually and use very careful language, not to instruct but to clarify. Because in some districts that don't have the budget for the kind of talent the other districts do, we're providing a guidance of the best ideas in the state. That's one thing. The other thing is we're thinking of those teachers who are brand new out of college, who are looking at this for the first time, and we want to equip them with the clarity of ideas. And this is leading to the idea that it's not, when you create an appendix of suggested reading for fulfilling some of the standards, you're not mandating them. And it would be helpful to these new teachers or the ones who come from districts where they're the one and only social studies department person, to share with them your best ideas as to what reading to recommend as intended.
We talked about using similar, like an idea of what are some of those, we had a very similar discussion about using almost like a best practice, as well as some instructional strategies that would help meet these needs, or some sort of a very, very similar idea. What are some of those things that could be used as suggested way to meet the standards that we're talking about? So, we talk about using some of that same thing. So we talk about how do we make the intradisciplinary, how do we combine some of those things? Because we had a lot of discussions where we would start saying, well, the tools, the inquiry ones are a perfect example. We talk about using the tools of inquiry, but do we want to weave those in throughout? Or do we keep it as a separate standard? Or do we want to do both? Or do we make sure, how do you, because we're afraid that if you just weave it in, does it sometimes get overlooked at times? But if it's left out, does it become a checkbox that you check off as a unit and then never come back to? So, making sure that we're kind of weaving all these pieces so that there is a bit of an alignment.
Tell you ideas we floated, and one was to have an introductory section that talked about disciplines of mind and perhaps these tools of inquiry separately from the description of the content and processes, knowing that this is an integrated document, that the expectations are these would be done throughout, and you don't have to single them out. That's one way to approach it.
The 8 math practices that are in the Common Core, things aren't perfect in Common Core, but the practices and how they recommend the practices are a nice tool for math teachers. And so that was part of our conversation is, are there social study practices that are a good recommendation for teachers to follow? So that was part of our conversation.
Again, you might use an appendix B, but you wouldn't dictate how to.
Because, in the language is explicitly that we're not about pedagogy, we're just about standard.
Well, and I think you kind of mentioned it, Patrick, the fact that what our charge is, and sir, you did also, we need to be very clear what our charge is versus what the next phase is for the frameworks that the state board is to develop, and then of course the local control. So I like hearing that you guys have had those conversations, because we've tried to reiterate that too, that our charge really truly is not beyond, looking at these standards. There's other pieces in place that are beyond us, so we need to stay clear on our focus. So good to hear.
And I'll just throw out tools of inquiry. When we look at our curriculum documents, they're articulated once, and they don't change anywhere as far as sophistication. And so something difficult work we've been doing in our district is, what does that tool look like at different grade levels? And so that's a pretty cool opportunity to say, we can introduce our younger thinkers in social studies to these concepts and then make them more complex over time. So by the time they're in high school, they're doing wonderful work that the document now doesn't suggest. So.
Well, and what I do like when you talked about, the practices or those habits of mind, when you look at that piece, the progression of those habits of mind isn't getting deeper, it's how they're using it and what they're using it with. So when we're talking about social science inquiry, those tools, it's kind of what Brian said. A kindergartner can analyze a primary source just the same as a high schooler can. It's just the source that they're using that looks different. And we have to not, forget about that. So the progressions might look a little bit different when we think about that versus the other content areas that I think is huge. So I do think, again, that's an area when we dig in that we have to really keep talking about.
Sounds like our groups are in a fairly similar place. We're all still real early in the work. I love that we both have chair people that can sort of communicate so that if one of us starts getting in a place where we really don't think it's gonna match up at the end, we can kind of pause and maybe get together in a group session again. So I'm pretty encouraged.
Can I ask you guys one question?
Sure.
I've been at elementaries and at middle schools, and that's like the global learners. A lot of where it came from was our elementary students, we don't talk about world history, and all of a sudden 6th grade, they're in world history class. And so they start going into Indian history and Chinese history, and the kids don't even have a framework of where they're starting, and so we kind of jump into the deep end. And so we wanted to kind of at least start building in, whether it's through explorers or whether it's through just a better understanding of some of those pieces, so that we know kind of, because that's what right now, the big thing I've seen when I went to in history is that they go straight into world history, and it's a huge jump. And so I'm curious as to what are some of those other pieces that you guys may have noticed that you kind of wish elementary kids came out of elementary school with, and went into middle school with? And I'm not sure, how much, if you guys have a lot of middle school, just that understanding of what are some of those key components that we might want to be thinking about that we're seeing in struggles when they come into middle school district.
We were talking about it, and I made the comment that this is our opportunity basically to push the publishers out of the way. That one of the reasons world history has been taught in isolation is because it was convenient for the publishers to hire a small group of experts in that area, publish, I'll go up and stay here. Plus, we have in our law the description of the three and saying how much coursework in these three. But the point is, it probably hasn't been integrated before because we've let publishers drive our scope and sequence. And we did have a discussion of how do you integrate right from the very young years economics. So my concern was how much of what we're talking about in economics in high school is really personal finance, because I'm seeing some language in here that looks like it's an individual's ownership, when actually if that's taught at a younger grade level, personal responsibility for your own finances, then you'll have an understanding of what it is to move to another level, to have responsibility for other people's money. And so there's a connection that it's not, unless we're in dialogue and talking together, the ability to create a strand at every grade level, or I should say, a deeper level of thought and information at every grade level on that one strand of economics, beginning with your personal finances and then moving up. Unless we're together on this, it's not going to be as beautiful as it could be. So economics is one of our issues.
Okay.
Because it drives history. There's no reason to pull it out as a different strand.
What we can do from that is, once I get my information, email me that question, I'll send it out to our group, and then you may have some people there that have an idea of what they've seen if they are in middle school, or they can ask some of their peers what.
And people in the room, so.
And one of the things we've been operating on is that the standards, are as we know them, with the understanding that once you guys come up with how you sequence things and where you place things, that we'll then have to almost adapt, at least to those early grades, to what we come up with. So, for example, we were talking about principles and what documents, and so we're building off of principles in certain documents that we're assuming will be covered in K-5, but we understand that assumption is fluid in a sense, because
Right.
it might change.
Right.
You just said the magic word assumption, because we discussed quite a bit at length here how social studies in the K-5 areas has taken a back seat to other things.
Absolutely.
And it's been literally, yeah, we'll have time for it on Friday afternoon, that's about it.
Right,
So, and that's huge.
It is
really actually, the reason for public funding is to teach people about their government and citizenship. This should be the priority. But, and this statement was made about No Child Left Behind, since the focus was on English and math, social studies got pushed aside. Common Core didn't do us any favors either. And what we need to do is restore, actually, I believe, the centerpiece of public in public schools, and that is our citizenship.
Well, and I think when we talk about history, it's something that I brought up earlier, when you say how much trouble kids are having when they're thrown into sixth grade with world history, is they also are not, I said, I don't know how I said this, but something to do with ELA, the reading. We're not reading these wonderful, this wonderful literature anymore. We're reading, my kids bring home stuff, as much as people love Judy Moody, all of those books, I think they're horrible. I think they're just absolutely terrible, but that's just me, because the language and the way they learn the English language in those is terrible. And so when you try to transpose that into reading historical documents, and kids are like, what is this? I'm used to ain't and can't, and she's stupid, and their level of, and their depth from a young age is not challenged. It's, I feel good, happy little, we're buddies, and I find it appalling, actually, but I think that's a challenge for history people that they, you know, you can't hardly separate the English and the reading literature from.
And that's the
And
interdisciplinary.
not that kids can't ever have fun or have fun reading, but there's just no literary documents anymore that are very good.
I'm really sorry. It was
Yeah,
great.
but we-
Not careful.
You know, it occurs to me that one of the things I saw on your chart there that we don't have the advantage of that you guys do is that you're focusing on an end result of the high stakes test. And I don't, you know, we have talked ad nauseum about the idea that social studies has been pushed into kind of a secondary role of we'll fit this into an English language arts standard somehow, some way. We use this, you know, Red Badge of Courage as our literature book, and oh, by the way, here's some social studies that goes along with it. So if we could figure out a way to put that same focus at the elementary level that you guys can put at the high school level on the target.
There's no end of course exam. Or, you know, there's nothing at the elementary school level that's going to necessarily test social studies or, you know.
I think that's kind of the area that I think we had in mind that we wanted to get together with you guys so that we could mesh up where we're beginning at to where you're targeting towards, and see if we can find some ways of making that merge well.
Well, and I think what you're getting to is the fact that we can't, where we're at middle school and high school, we can't do without you having that same target in mind. And so thank you for, you know, complimenting the work.
The other thing too is none of this should be set up to satisfy an assessment.
Exactly.
It should
We
not
agree.
be that.
We agree. Okay.
Hey Steve, does your email end with US?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have anything else, Bruce?
Well, don't get discombobulated because we use global awareness. That's just a word we use for now to figure out
They didn't, I
a
did.
global context.
So
Well, don't
if
get
you
discombobulated.
do Christmas around the world, you're looking at global awareness, right?
Absolutely, why not?
Thank you guys so much for coming.
Yes,
Thank you. Safe travels to your house.
But I do charge you with
Life is good.
And we should
And we will smile.
Good seeing you.